Good to see you all, and welcome to the Shekinah Centre for our, I almost said annual Hustings event, but that's what it feels like for me. We seem to do quite a lot of these. And thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. I want to run through some housekeeping, some general things with you first, if I may. We're intending to aim to be finished by 9 o'clock. I think if you've got a target to aim for, it gives you hope that you might get home. I suppose you're all pleased that it's tonight and not last night, because the choice between tonight doing this and England playing football was a difficult one, I realise. Yeah, so we'll keep it for 9 o'clock, and that's fine. If at any time during the evening you need to go to the toilet, feel free, just go, preferably in the toilet. It's through the door there, my left, your right, down the stairs, and you'll find the toilets clearly signposted. We're not expecting a fire drill tonight. We're hoping that nothing happens to cause that. But if it does sound, you'll also see a red light next to that door flashing. If that starts to flash, you need to vacate the building as soon as possible. And we'd ask that you use the main door at the back and the door at the side there to exit the building, and then you assemble outside the flats on the side there. There is a list of all 9 candidates on the door as you came in tonight, and we did refer to the, if you like, the Electoral Commission about how we should do this tonight, because in the past we've never had to have 9 candidates, and we thought to have 9 in a room tonight might just be a bit unmanageable for us. And so we went down the list and we invited everybody. 1 candidate declined to attend, and 3 other candidates did not respond to any of the emails or texts or phone calls that I made over the last month. And 1 was not invited because by that time we'd achieved our panel of 4. Hence tonight our panel is Ian Flindle, representing Green Party, Andrew George, representing Liberal Democrats, David Leahy, Independent, and Derek Thomas, representing Conservative and Unionist Party. In a moment, I'm going to ask each of the candidates to give us 3 minutes on what their overall vision would be as a candidate for this constituency. And then during the evening I'll be posing questions to the candidates, some of which have been sent into our church office already, so I've got them here. Some of the people that sent them in are actually here in attendance, and so I'll invite them to read their question out. I would say from our perspective it's important that everyone is treated with respect, and to that end I would ask that you do not shout out, but you give people the space to speak on the microphone and request the microphone so that you can offer your comments. So Nigel at the back will have a roving mic. If you put your hand up, I'll direct him towards you, and then you'll be able to ask your question. And the other thing to say is that, and I wrote it like this, and I amended it and then put it back, and that is that aggressive, abusive and discriminatory language will not be tolerated in this place today. And finally, to remind you that this is a place of worship, and as such we would ask that you would honour that in the way that you speak or respond throughout the evening. Is everybody happy with those ground rules? Yeah. Do I need to run through them again? No. It's like when you make that phone call and they say, do you want to run through all the options again? No, I don't. So I'm not going to go through those. So I'm going to ask each of the candidates to now just give us an outline. So I'm going to start on my left, and I'm going to ask Ian if he could talk to us. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Ian Flindle, parliamentary candidate for the Green Party. Oh, sorry.
Here you go.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
I joined in 1979 because here was a party that realised that the standard politics and economic effort and mantra was leading to unsustainable damage to the environment, unsustainable poor welfare and well-being for citizens, and unsustainably unfair wealth distribution. And after many years of developing what we call a manifesto for a sustainable society, we realised that there's not a choice between looking after the environment and looking after people, their social and economic well-being. We can and must do both, because many of the policies needed to bring about a just and fair society will also protect and restore the environment. What we say is that social justice and justice for the environment go hand in hand. And over the intervening years, I believe elements of our ethos have begun to be taken on board by the other parties, but not nearly enough, which is why the increasing support for the Green Party is vital in keeping the pressure on. Time is running out. As we speak, Mexico is on fire and people are losing homes. Texas is underwater and people are losing homes. The French are worried that their Olympics that are coming up are going to be marred by people getting ill or even dying in the increased heat that Paris now experiences. And we all know that most of our farmland was underwater for months over the winter, which will have knock-on effects for our own this year's harvest. Now, we want to present you with proposals for Cornwall, of course, and here we try and bring that holistic approach to the environment and economics and well-being, and look at real practical problems. Cost of homes to buy or rent has got to be addressed. And we've got this particular problem with second homes, of course, which we would like to tax out of existence. We would end the right to buy social housing. We'd want to build 150 new, decent social homes of high efficiency standard. And what I see being built around us, I don't count them to be terribly high standard. We've all suffered the cost of gas and electricity imposed by multinational companies. Standing charges there are a disgrace. And we obviously want to implement a street-by-street insulation scheme so that we can help everybody reduce demand and create warm, comfortable homes, safe and healthy homes. And this is a particular problem in our granite, solid wall granite cottages. So we would reduce demand, thereby also reducing emissions, that environmental connection, generate from renewable sources, and stop being at the mercy of global energy prices. It's an utter disgrace that although we have 95% of our own energy in this country, be it fossil fuel or renewable, when Ukraine found itself invaded by Russia, our energy prices went through the roof. That's because there's a global price for energy, and we need to get ourselves weaned off that process. Of course, we've had a lack of decent job opportunity, having left the EU, amongst other reasons, losing an immense amount of funds.
Can you wind up now?
I'm winding up. Good. And local production for local consumption. Thank you.
Very much. Andrew.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. So my name is Andrew George. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate, and the key issues in which I'm fighting this campaign is to address the chaos and the problems which have been generated in this country, both locally and nationally. I mean, amongst the issues which need to be rebuilt or restored include our NHS, the housing injustice, both locally and nationally, that exists. I mean, when you consider that £500 million of taxpayers' money has been handed to holiday home owners in the last 10 years through a loophole I've been campaigning on for some time, whilst at the same time thousands of local families have been evicted to make way for yet more holiday homes. You can see the nature of the injustice. I mean, when I was a Member of Parliament here, I campaigned against the bedroom tax, which was a way of kind of penalising the poor, whilst the wealthy were being rewarded with tax concessions for their second homes. Those kind of injustices need to be put right. And similarly, in relation to the pollution in our seas and rivers, £74 billion of water bill payers' money has gone into the pockets of shareholders and top executives through their bonuses, whilst at the same time pollution in our seas has more than doubled in the last 5 years, and they failed to invest the money which we've given them to address the issues of producing clean seas. So there's a whole set of issues which we really do need to change the dial, the way in which we approach politics in this country. And people say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, there's a whole, our manifesto is costed. And I think when you take into account that 2/3 of the wealth of this country is held by 1/5 of the population, you can see we're one of the most unequal countries in the OECD and in the Western world. So we have the wealth and we have the ability to address the serious issues which we face. And over recent years, we've seen very significant widening inequality, which clearly needs to be addressed. And it's all very well for a government to say that they're levelling up, or that those with the broadest shoulders take the greatest burden, or that we're all in it together. But that's a facade in terms of what's actually happening, which is everything's going in the opposite direction. The poor getting poorer and struggling, and the rich getting richer. And I think that kind of facade of market relations politics versus the reality of what they're delivering in terms of policy needs to be challenged. I also think that at base, the issue is one of values. For too long, this country is seen as one that, and the politics of such is one that driven by greed, prejudice, and fear. I think we need more kindness at the centre of our politics. And when I uttered this, I was attacked by someone of the other conservative persuasion, saying, no, we need strength, kindness is weakness. Well, there's nothing weak about standing up to bullies. There's nothing weak about confronting bigotry. There's nothing weak about challenging and facing down powerful vested interests. What we need in this country is the strength of kindness, something which is seriously missing. And when you hear Secretaries of State saying that homelessness is a lifestyle choice, or that the poor have only themselves to blame, I think we're living in a country which needs to be seriously turned around in the way in which we look at politics, as well as how we do politics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to ask David Leahy to speak. Thank you.
Hello, I'm David Leahy. I'm your independent candidate for this constituency. I put up only very recently, in fact, on the very last day of candidacy and entrance. And the reason being, I was sort of encouraged to do it by a lot of people who know what I do locally and nationally. And I'm primarily an investigator, not a politician, which might sound a bit wrong, but I've worked as a policeman and a detective in this town for many years, and many of the towns in the southwest of Cornwall, St Ives, Helston, Hale, for a very long time. So I've got an analytical mind. So what I've done is gone out on the streets and found out what the problems are locally. It's all very well, I think, having a central government policy from London, but they have no clue about what we need as people down here. Our community is unique, and it has its unique problems, its unique aspects, and the people need a unique, holistic approach to their individual problems and situations. So I've been out on the streets asking people what the main problems are, and it's the same thing. I think we'll all agree it's holiday homes, but they're remaining empty. I don't think it's as simplistic as has been suggested, tax them out of existence. I think they are part of the need for funding in this area, but I think there needs to be a balance. And when I've analysed what the young people in particular have been saying to me is that they would like to stay here and work here, but they can't. I've talked to the young professionals who've saved up deposits for houses and they can't afford a house, even at discounted prices. It's ridiculous. So I think we can get a balance between the holiday industry, second home industry, and the new home industry. And we can use the tax revenue from the holiday industry to fund new homes for our youngsters who want to stay in the area, work in the area, and build an infrastructure. And I think there should be a limit to the number of houses, new houses built, versus the number of dentists and doctors and schools per community. We need to rebuild smaller communities, not just have a massive house building system whereby the rich can buy them up. They need to be subsidised, and they can be. There's plenty of money in the system. I've found that it's misappropriated. It's far too much are going to the shareholders and the heads of all these companies. The privatisation of everything is taking a massive chunk of the funding, and we get the trickle-down effect. And this area needs an independent approach. It needs independent investigation as to our particular needs, and they need addressing from here, not from London. And I can't quite fill the 3 minutes.
That's fine, David. Thank you very much. Thank you. And finally, Derek. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for coming along this evening on such a beautiful evening. I can't tell you what an extraordinary honour and privilege it is to be the MP of an area where I grew up. I grew up in Southside Helston. I left school and became a builder I did an apprenticeship with Cornish Mason, then worked in the voluntary sector both in Helston and here in Penzance. And to be able to, I treated that as an apprenticeship, if you like, and to be able to learn, to take all I learned from that and use it to represent this area has been really extraordinary. And what makes it such a privilege is that it is all about people. It's about whoever we meet day in, day out in this constituency, whether it's the very youngest and very oldest, whether it's the ones that really have challenges to live with every single day of the week, or others that actually life has been kind. It's a great opportunity to listen, to learn from them, and then to try and understand how, as David said really, how you can look at what's been set in nationally, and how that can be done to support a local area such as West Cornwall, and I'd say the furthest really from London as far as travel is concerned. What I've done as my habit has been ever since I first stood in 2010 is to put out a local manifesto, and most of you will have received this through your door. I apologise, I thought we all do for the amount of literature you've received. But I've always set about putting down what I believe is a local commitment, a manifesto for the area that can be delivered by the local MP, working with local leaders, with the local community, but also with the officials and government in London. So the first one is to work to deliver more well-paid, skilled jobs. We do that because that really busts open this problem of poverty. It gives people real hope and aspiration in the future. It allows them to purchase homes and to raise their families in our area, which is so beautiful. And let's face it, we need to keep young people in the area if we want them to do the jobs that we'll rely on when we're much older. To protect our food and farmers and food production, fishing as well. To work to solve the housing challenges, a really complex issue. As I said, I started in the building trade. I understand how challenging the built environment is, but also how important a home, secure, safe home, whether you own it or rent it, is to every aspect of a family life. To enhance their education and skills, giving people from the very youngest to wherever the age might be, the opportunity to live full lives and to excel. To build up our fishing industry, there's a real opportunity now. We can do that in Newlyn and right across our coast. Our coast is so connected to our fishing, and if we can build up the inshore fishing fleet, for example, we support every part of our coastal community in the constituency, and then to support local NHS services. And by working together, there is evidence that some of these things are working. You'll see the development of West Cornwall Hospital. There's a building project in St Mary's on Scilly. You'll see lots of scaffolding around the town. This is about working with the community to secure the money we need to invest in the services that people need as close to home as possible. It's a real privilege, as I say, to serve in this way. And I hope to enjoy the opportunity to do it for a little longer. Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you. Thanks, Fred. Well, from my perspective, it was great. I didn't have to call time on anybody there, so that's really, really good. We didn't set a theme for this evening, so we've got questions that have been sent in, and also you may have questions you want to ask, so we're going to try and mix it up a bit. But I want to start with a question that was sent in to us by a local head teacher, and the question basically is around funding for education. And so the question is, would the prospective candidates please give their views on the disparity between the per pupil funding between Cornwall and other parts of the country? And I just want to say on that, I know as a chairman of school governors that if we were in Birmingham, we would get at least £1,500 per pupil more than we get down here. So that's there. In addition, what would they do to address the significant shortfall between what it actually costs to support people with an EHCP, which is an education health care plan, and the funding that then is provided from the local authority? And that gap can be up to £9,000 per child per year. So can we start off, Derek? Would you like to start the answer on that one, please?
I was just looking at the figures for, So Giane Mortimer, who was the Education Secretary 2017-18, we accepted as a government that the funding formula for schools was just wrong. Urban areas received much more, as Nigel said, per child, what they call the baseline funding. Then rural areas, and Cornwall and Devon particularly suffered because of that area. And so we have definitely had schools, and we have schools, which are funded less per pupil than other parts of the country. So when Giane Mortimer was the Secretary of State, she put in a funding to address the funding formula so that every child, everywhere in the country, would receive, the school would receive the same baseline funding. Now the problem you'll have is that to achieve that, immediately you take money from an urban area, such as Birmingham, I think it was Birmingham used as an example, and then you give it to Cornwall. Well, I can tell you that schools in Birmingham took exception to that. So there is a tapering, but there is a drifting towards, drifting is a complete wrong word, there's a very deliberate scaling up of baseline funding, so that has Cornwall has benefited from that. But the reality is, and this is where I think we haven't really fully understood the challenge, is that particularly since COVID, the costs of keeping schools open has risen extraordinarily quickly. So while the funding has started to go up for schools in our area, the baseline funding, the cost of energy, the cost of some of the costs around teaching and support staff has gone up much quicker than the money that was made available. Now, in terms of education supporting the most vulnerable and the children that need our greatest help, and I would accept, and I have accepted for a long time now, that we are failing a large number of children who need a bit of extra support in mainstream education. In the NHS 10-year plan, the first page addressed that very point and said that the assessments for these education and healthcare plans needed to be sped up quickly. And so the way that's addressed now, and I'm not sure that is happening, it certainly is in the right direction, and I know from personal experience that it is taking place, but at the moment, schools will struggle, and I know that Newland School that Niles referred to, schools will struggle for the whole of the 5 years the child is there to get that plan in place and to get the support and the funding that's needed. The intention is that work is done before we even get to primary school, so that work will be done in a preschool setting. And there is money going into preschools to try and support that assessment, support staff there to assess that child, work with them more counselling and deliver the right outcome, so that when they get to primary school, that support is understood and in place. The real challenge that must be resolved, and any government needs to do this, is, and it's not a criticism of any local authority, but at the moment, both the assessment and the funding comes from the local authority via government, via taxpayers, but that the burden is placed on the council, and the demand is far greater than the supply of cash. And so we probably need a system where the assessment are done completely separate from local authority, so there's no risk whatsoever of any sort of delay or any sort of unnecessary barrier put in the way of getting the right outcome for our child. But I fully accept, having met with lots of children, and lots of parents have taken children out of school for this reason, that there are children that are starting life in a way that is just not acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, would you like to respond?
So, I mean, on the one hand, you can judge by what one professes, or you can judge on where we got to, and where we got to is as the head teacher's question implies. I mean, the crisis in education has never been so bad, so you can judge on that basis rather than on what the promises are. And the issue really is, how do we get ourselves out of the hole in which education currently finds itself? Because not only is there an issue of of insufficient funding going into education as a whole, I mean, the question raises the issue about whether the cake is divided fairly across the country geographically. I'll come back to that one in a minute. And then there's a further issue, and this is an extremely serious issue, as Derek rightly highlighted, and that is those pupils who need additional assistance, the SEN budget or the EHCP support that has been referred to. And I mean, the Liberal Democrats would increase per pupil funding above inflation year on year. We have a costed programme to achieve that, and would also tax the digital, well, impose a digital services tax on social media firms and other tech giants to fund the essential investments necessary to provide not only a qualified mental health professional attached to every single school, but also ensure that the budget is there to support those pupils that need additional help, because there's a serious shortage going on in education at present. One of the biggest problems I think that we have in education is the gimmicks that have been pursued in recent years of both free schools and academy trusts. And whilst I can see that some of the disciplines that are brought in can be helpful in a way, what's actually happened is that whilst resources have been withdrawn from the classroom, the top execs have done extremely well. And what's happened is that the academy trusts have become larger and wealthier, and the top execs are on over £100,000 salaries and expenses, and often they are out of touch with what's actually happening in the classroom. I mean, while I was MP, the Conservatives put money into free schools, and we had wonderful £9 million spent on a new free school in Camborne, the one that kind of came into Cornwall. That failed, and so that's £9 million went down the drain. I know it's now being used by the state sector in other ways, but the fact that these kind of experiments, which are driven by political dogma, can be permitted to waste public resources when in fact we need those resources on the front line, in the classroom, supporting pupils, not pursuing political gimmicks. And that's what I'm committed to do if I'm elected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. David, would you like to comment, please?
Yes, I'll give a couple of comments. I think Andrew's right with the salaries of the executives is far too out of proportion. We need to redress the balance there. Privatisation of companies, etc. The salaries are immense. In my day, it might be a backward way of thinking, but if you provided a good service and ran a really good business, you'd make a profit, and your salary and your profit would be based on your performance. It seems to me that these agencies now, they set their salaries and they set their profit margins first, and what's left over is to provide a pitiful service. That's got to stop. Derek mentioned about 5 years. 5 years is a lifetime for a child. A year is a lifetime for a child of school age. We need to sort it out immediately. Now, it occurs to me, with my analytical head on again, that it was mentioned that, is it £1,500 more in the per child?
Yeah.
Well, somebody had to make that assessment. There was somebody or some committee that made the assessment that that was the going rate for a child in that area. Why would it be any different anywhere else? If that's the going rate, why are we taking money away from that and to give to other places like Cornwall? We should just be bringing every child's level up to that level. Instead of taking things away and plugging gaps, we need to solve the problems at grassroots level. And that's why we need to look at local issues, local schools. And I think I know what's going on here. I brought up 8 children in this area. My daughter is a teacher in Truro. And I have been a school governor on 3 different schools in this area, one in Penzance, one in Marazine. So I can see the lack of funding. Well, it isn't a lack of funding, it's an out of balance of funding. There are extortionate fees going to the top people, as Andrew quite rightly said, but the trickle-down effect which was once alluded to by government, is not happening. It is not happening. You should get what you deserve, not what you think you deserve, as a remuneration. And if you do a good job, you get a good remuneration. But let's see the job done for the children first before we start talking about high salaries and profits. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Ian.
Well, I guess there are good reasons for the disparity in that inner city areas could justify increased needs. So presumably what we're really talking about is an overall increase in funding being required. The first thing we would do is to bring all schools back under your local authority control, because it's so inefficient what's going on at the moment. And I'm not talking about the inefficiency of teachers. They're under enough pressure. They don't need to be worrying about how the school is maintained and how the electricians are procured, or all the other things that go on individually amongst schools, instead of being organised in a more cost-effective way. But there is a great shortfall in funding, and Greens make no mistake about it. We need to raise more money for a whole load of things, and education is one. We want to be spending an extra £9.2 billion a year on schools, including a £2 billion uplift for teachers and other staff, and a capital spend of £13 billion, because there's lots of need for capital improvements and investment in new schools. So that's it. It comes down to money, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Okay, yes, Andy.
Okay, I did say in my response that I was going to address the issue, or just comment on the issue of the disparity and the uneven playing field in terms of the geography. I mean, that was one that we were perpetually dealing with, and I'm sure that Derek has been dealing with it, with something which perpetually arises, both in education and local authority funding and health funding, wherever you establish a formula and you make and you divide the cake up, there will be winners and losers, and if there is an average, there'll be some which will be above the average and some which will be below the average. That's just simply, a fact of life. And it's always frustrated me that Cornwall is too often on the wrong side of the average, both in terms of health funding and education funding. While I was a Member of Parliament, we made the case. We interrogated very closely the formula and the methodologies which we use to apportion funding, and of course this has to be taken outside, if you like, political influence. It has to be kind of objectivised, and that civil servants have to kind of manage that particular process. But nevertheless, as politicians, you kind of set the parameters and the priorities, and it's really very important that we make sure that the measures of poverty recognise that poor people in Cornwall, for example, may actually have a car because they need to have a car, but it's probably not much of a car. Whereas car ownership, if you like, has often been sort of seen as a sign of kind of wealth in comparison with urban areas where they don't need a car. And there are other kind of measures within. I mean, that's just one example of many. But there are other measures which I think need to be reviewed. And whilst we kind of challenged these things and brought Cornwall's education funding up to and closer to the average and improved Cornwall's sort of allocation from the cake, I mean, these things sort of change over time. It's something which obviously is not special pleading. It's the importance of having an MP that's prepared and has the intellect to kind of scrutinise these things and to pursue the matter, on a very regular basis. It's not, and it's a bit like painting the Forth Bridge. I have to say that once you've kind of won that argument, you've got to go back over it again. So it's a perpetual process of kind of making sure that the system is working fairly. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you. Would anybody like to make a comment or ask a further question on the back of that? Gentleman over here, thank you.
Yeah, I'll have to go to that line to get me figures.
Yeah, absolutely fine. We'll bring the microphone to you. Yeah, that's right. Should have gone to Specsavers.
Oh no, I don't think we can.
There's a lot of, I arrived a little bit late, but a lot of what I'm hearing is funding, allocation of the pot.
Hold the mic.
Sorry, a lot of what I'm hearing is funding, allocation of the pot, how we can portion money out, etc. I've just got a couple of figures to give you. from March 24.
Mhm.
So the UK government debt, yeah, that's the government debt, was approaching 3 trillion
Mhm.
and increasing at £5,170 per second. And at my calculation is 46,671 per citizen and 81,100 per taxpayer. Yeah, so that's the government debt. As we come into private debt, so we say business debt, mortgage, etc., that's as January 23, that's approaching 2 billion, which was 34,000 per annum. Yeah, and then we've got what we call the black hole of the, or what is a Ponzi scheme really, the pension pot. So we've got the black hole of the pension pot. So we're talking 5 trillion plus national debt, which is government, private, and the black hole of the pension pot, which we don't know how many billions that is. Now, I've got a lot more figures, but I'm just trying to be as quick as I can, really.
Can I just ask you, are you
Is this education?
Are you responding
To the
what's
education?
been said on education?
Yeah, it's all
Education.
about funding and money and
Yeah, can you come to the point now as to what you're going to say? Thank you.
So we, one estimate recently, it was 1.5 billion of our taxpayers' money per week was going to service the interest payments only of government debt. 1.5 billion per week. So my question is to all the candidates, do you know where money, specifically currency, and when I say currency, I'm not talking about cash, because that's only 2.5% approximately of what we call currency. The electric currency, do you know where that comes from?
Here we go. So,
Considering we're about 6-7 trillion pounds in debt, I think it's a pertinent question.
okay. So, which of you would like to be brave to start answering that question? Nobody. Right. Here we
You know the
go.
answer, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say we need to repeat. Would you like to comment on that?
I don't think I'm qualified, but I'll have a go.
Well, I started the last one.
Oh, go on.
All right,
Go on.
go on. Here we go.
So we've discussed this previously, and I've always acknowledged that I don't understand the issue fully. But the reality is that this money doesn't actually exist. It doesn't exist. It's somehow, when you buy a house, you get a mortgage, that money goes in and you pay the money back to wherever it's gone. You never see it, as you say, you never see the actual cash. But my concern...
I never said that.
No, I'm not saying you're saying that, I'm saying that.
Yeah,
Sorry, you
you
said
said-
about 2.6% was actual currency. Is that right you said?
About approximately, yeah,
So the
2.5%
real
physical cash.
Yeah, real cash. If we had it in Africa, now it would be that much. But the concern, I mean, it is a concern, but it isn't actually just a concern for us in the UK. It's a concern for the whole of the world. You talked about the amount of government payment. It's I think the figure is as much as the education we spend on education, we spend on servicing the debt of the nation, the public debt. If you go to the poorest countries in the world, it's extraordinary, the debt that they're having to address, and the drain on their public services is extraordinary. The money, I think in some of the African countries, the Tier Fund is working with in Parliament recently, that they're spending more on looking after or paying back debt or paying the interest on debt.
Do you know where that money comes from? That's the question.
Well, for the developing countries, it's lent by very suspect lenders, and they're not states.
IMF, World Bank.
Well, not necessarily in the third world, in developing countries. Certainly, I would imagine that's true in West. Well, it's proven in Western countries.
In Ukraine as
But
well.
in the developing countries, it's actually very bad debt that is trapping the countries indefinitely unless we find some way to.
Okay. And
So can I answer the question properly?
No, can you let the
I thought the
candidates...
audience would be quite interested by the £6 billion.
I think if the audience are interested to ask you afterwards, that's fine.
No, if the audience want an answer now,
No.
why we're £7 trillion in debt.
Yeah. Can we just let
If
the
nobody's
candidates
interested,
speak,
I'll-
please? We did say at the beginning about please respect
Well,
for
nobody's
that.
answered the question.
So if
I'll
you
give it
take
a
your
go.
seat, the gentleman
Are you
will
talking about the
make a
Bank of
comment.
International Settlements and the IMF? And the
No,
creation of
where does that
money
money come from?
is created through thin air, if you understand banking.
97%, 8% of this money is created out of thin air,
Correct.
which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that because it's called credit. That's perfectly fine. Like Derek said, when you get a mortgage, you actually create £100,000 of your own debt and it's credited. The issue is they don't create the interest, which could be £40,000.
Yes.
And because 90% of what we call money comes into circulation that way, there's never any way to pay back that money. It isn't a byproduct of bad capitalism. It is built into the system to enslave peoples and nations. And because we're in a Christian church, that is the reason why Jesus turned over the tables outside the synagogue. It goes back a long time.
So, if I'm right in thinking, you're talking about the interest.
The interest.
And I think I did do a few talks on this around the country, on which included this, and I tried to simplify it. Now, if everybody in this room had one token, and this was a closed system, and I didn't need my token, but I lent Nigel my token, and you lent that one and yours to Andrew, right? But you asked for interest. If we've only created 100 tokens, where does the interest come from? There's not a 101, 101st or 102nd token in that closed system. So it's an imaginary, it's created.
The only way to keep the system going, to stop everybody going bankrupt, is to create more credit, which increases the debt and the disparity between debt and actual money in existence. And the banking cartel systematically create a boom by lowering interest rates, then create a bust.
I need to bring this to a...
Well, this is fraud on an enormous scale.
Okay,
So your conclusion then would be we need a credit-based system rather than a debt.
And government should be banned from borrowing.
If you would like to take your seat, that's absolutely fine. We'll continue. Andrew and Ian, do you want to comment on this at all?
I'd like to ask a question. How much is that?
Oh, don't ask questions. For God's sake, don't ask him a question, for God's sake.
How much is that 7 trillion debt per person?
I mean, you'd have to... I've worked it out as individual, but you'd have to get a calculator.
Well, how much is it?
Well, I haven't got a calculator, Brett. Give me a calculator and work it out.
I've just done it in my calculator doesn't really want to go that far. But it says £174, is that right?
That's
No, it'd be a great deal more than that. No, your calculator needs to be looked at again. I've heard.
We'll move on.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's see if we can. That's down to your chairmanship. Okay. Well, I know exactly where you're coming from, and I've heard this before, and there are lots of theories out there, and people who share them. I mean, we could go back to the gold standard. We could go back to other different ways of managing money. I mean, on the serious note, which is the national debt, which I think we do understand and has been growing very significantly. I mean, clearly, we can't carry on allowing that debt to purely increase. I have to say, I am an enthusiast for the kind of Keynesian way of addressing the challenges which this country faces, and therefore, not that we can spend our way out of the crisis that we're in, but certainly there are some things in which we can invest, which would result in circulating that money around the economy a great deal more than in others, and that is by actually providing the kind of services like education. The multiplier effect within the economy is significantly higher than giving that money to holiday homeowners, for example. So the issue for a policymaker is how do we get the current crisis in public finance, the kind of fiscal policy, under control. And whilst I understand the kind of international conspiracy theories about various other things
Excuse me.
Yeah, I'm just...
Do not say conspiracy.
Okay, sorry, no, of course, no. I'll keep an open... Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah. I think...
Let's keep this respectful.
Well, okay, I'll keep an open mind if you keep
Well,
an
there's
open.
no open mind.
There's a question. Okay, now I'll keep an open mind. I'll keep an open mind that you might be right if you keep an open mind that you might be wrong. Okay? You promise that? Will you do that? Will you do that? Thank you.
No, I won't.
No, you won't. No, exactly. Well, I think you've you've helped me make my point. I think he's helped me make my point as far as open and closed minds when it comes to. Thank you. So I mean, the point is when it comes to public finance, to the nuts and bolts of getting this country back on its feet again, because it's not on its feet at present. Then, as I say, we need to have people who know how the system works, who know how to spend money to make sure that it actually helps those who need it, rather than providing money for those who clearly don't need it. It is just simply helping to widen the inequalities in our society. That's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll move on.
Thank you.
As I said to you, some questions have been sent in, and I don't know whether, I know one or two people are here. Is there a lady called Kat Smith? No. Okay, Kat's not here, so I will ask the question. The question is this. Given that in Penzance, to rent a 2-bedroom home for a family, that's if you can find one, it costs more than 2 people on minimum wage, that on minimum wage can realistically make in the area. I'd like to know what specifically the candidates would do to alleviate the housing crisis in Penzance. David, can I start with you this time, please?
Yes, sure. I think I alluded to this in the opening.
Yeah.
I've been walking around the constituency, and we were doing leaflets and talking to locals in Mousehole, for an example, and spoke to a lady who'd lived there for 42 years, and she said that there's several problems. It's not just an overall problem. There's several little things that are adding together. One of them was that the council houses were sold off to the owners at a cheap rate years ago, and as those people have passed, the families have tried to buy those houses and stay in the area, but on the open market, plus they have to have inheritance tax, some of them, because of their value, they can't get enough funding to buy them, so they're getting sold off to people who've got the money from outside of the county. That's one issue. The other thing is, we found a street there with 17 properties empty, holiday lets empty, and the problem there is there's no infrastructure to support the holiday lets. It's dying. A couple of weeks ago you can buy, and I think you still can, you can buy a house in regions of Italy for €1 because there's nobody there, there's no infrastructure. They're trying to get the youngsters back into those areas. And I can see this happening here where we've got an imbalance of holiday homes. You cannot tax them out of all existence. They bring in money and wealth into the community. So I've suggested that we ring fence the income from the council tax for holiday homes and second homes. That's ring fence to build and subsidise homes for the workforce that want to stay and live in Cornwall. They obviously have to have certain criteria. You know, they have to be born here or whatever the criteria we collectively decide. And if they qualify, they should have a house at an affordable price. And affordable doesn't mean 300,000 or 400,000 like some of these are. It means if you can afford it on your income. I have the definition of affordable here. It's quite lengthy from the Oxford English Dictionary, but it doesn't mean what we think it means in housing terms. So if we subsidise the housing, and if its market value was, just for argument's sake, 300,000, subsidise it, let them buy it for 100,000. The funds from the holiday homes will pay that. And then we will have an infrastructure which brings more people down into those homes. They're used, they're rented, and the revenue goes around and round. And we keep the revenue in Cornwall. At the moment, they rent the properties and the revenue goes straight out of Cornwall. If the infrastructure's here, and that infrastructure would then need schools, teachers, dentists, and that could be built in a ratio of balance. We need a balanced community. We are way out of balance. The money has tipped the balance too far one way, and because of that, we now have empty houses, and we are going down very quickly to the situation where there will be nobody left here with the skill sets to look after us in Cornwall.
Thanks, David. Thank you. Ian, would you like to respond?
Yeah, housing is a major issue. Sorry. I mean, there's masses of examples, but we have a couple of friends in our family. One's a skilled tree surgeon, the other one's a senior district nurse. They looked for housing for 18 months here. but now they're in Yorkshire because they had to go that far to be able to afford to buy something. So ordinary people doing reasonably well-paid jobs cannot afford to buy houses in this area. That is leading to communities hollowing out and disappearing. Now, it's then particularly aggravating to look around and see empty houses, particularly with nice views, which are of course second homes, let alone thousands of holiday homes that are only occupied for part of the year. We really must do something about this. I believe there's 46,000 people on the housing list in Cornwall. And there's about the same number of second homes and holiday homes doing nothing. We really must not allow the London bonuses to be able to be put into local properties for purely investment purposes, because that's all they are. We, in our little farm, we've got 2 second homes. That's not ours. They've been bought by other people. One was bought for 750,000 just before COVID, and a year later it was sold for 1.2 million. Neither of those prices are affordable, but somebody made 800,000 thereabouts in a year on a second home. This cannot be allowed to continue. We've either got to tax them out of existence, or what I would prefer personally, although it's not Green Party policy, I'd like to treat it like the homes that were compulsorily purchased for the HS2 line. Just compulsorily purchase a couple and put them on the market at affordable rate. That would soon put them all back on the market. But a bit draconian perhaps. But we really cannot allow this to go on, because the alternative is just to cover the countryside in poorly built mass houses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Derek?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, to avoid covering the countryside in poorly built homes, there's 2 things that are happening to address that. One is that the government have been working on with the Lords. They commissioned a group in the Lords to do a land use framework which identifies right across the country where homes should be built, where nature should be able to recover, where food should be produced and where infrastructure should be provided. That work is well underway. The report was supposed to be, would have been, or may still be released this autumn. And that's the first time actually the government has probably looked at the whole of the country and looked at where these things should take place. As we have increasing pressure on land, both to produce food, to produce energy, and to produce the homes and the services we need. So that would avoid quite rightly Ian's concern about covering the countryside and housing. The Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which went through Parliament and was completed in March of last year, does address the problem. I would agree that in many cases it took far too long to do, but it sets a premium for people that own second homes and don't live in them don't live in them as permanent residents. So the council can apply a premium to their council tax, 100%. If you don't rent your holiday let for a certain amount of days and you have to evidence, you can't just advertise, you have to evidence that it was rented out for that period of time, you lose your business rate relief. And I'll explain a minute about what that business rate relief is for. Also, there's the introduction of a register of holiday lets. We've never had that, which is, while Andrew's quite right that during the COVID pandemic, businesses received grants and that included holiday lets. The reason that happened is because we have no record that when businesses are supported with business rate relief, there isn't up until now through this legislation any understanding of which business is which. So it could have been a garage that was, actually wouldn't have been a garage selling fuel because they're allowed to carry on, but it could have been a shop on a shop corner that couldn't stay open, such as a craft shop, or it could have been a holiday let. There was no way of knowing which is which. So the registration is addressing that problem. But also, there's the opportunity for the council to introduce a planning clause. So if you then sell your house for the kind of money that Ian's referring to, if someone turns up, the council can demand that they apply for a planning clause if they're not going to live in it permanently. So that is being made available to local councils. But there's a couple of things that I think we absolutely need to do and can do here in Cornwall, and I've been battling on both for a long time, and it needs much more political will locally to do. One is empty homes. I'm not talking about second homes, I'm not talking about holiday lets, I'm just talking about the empty homes I see in every community when I'm delivering leaflets and knocking on doors, we can identify who owns them. We have to really step up the effort to get those homes, where possible, back into use. Not all of them can be, but many could be. Use local skills and trades to deliver that work. And then where we need to go further, and the council can do this, they can offer to let the property, but what we should do further, which at the moment can't be done, is that property should be made available to rent or buy, or even have shared equity for people that need housing that are on the housing list. We allow that for new buildings, but new buildings are sold at market value. So down in Long Rock, 350,000 for a 3-bedroom house, offered at shared equity. Shared equity requires that you pay a higher interest rate because it can't be repossessed, and all sorts of other charges. If we could apply that to existing homes, you reduce the pressure on infrastructure, reduce the pressure on greenfields, and you would actually really resolve a lot of the housing issues. The second thing is rent to buy. In other parts of the country, and I managed to get number 10 and the housing department to change the legislation on this. In other parts of the country, new homes are built, they're rented out for a lifetime tenancy to working families at an affordable rent, and then during that time that family has the opportunity to buy it. For whatever reason, successive administrations of Cornwall Council have refused to do that. They just will not allow it to happen in Cornwall. Now, just interestingly, about 2 months ago, I was challenged by the officers when I raised it once more to go and find a site as a pilot. We found a site in St Borough which didn't go that way. It did become social housing, but it didn't go the route we were initially planning for. We've now identified potential for 90 homes somewhere else in this constituency where we could use that as a pilot with very early conversations. But for whatever reason, Cornwall Council have religiously refused to allow this scheme to be made available, and they argue that it doesn't protect those houses in perpetuity. What it does do is provide a home for working families, which gives them a secure home, and I think it's ludicrous that we block that because we're worried about how that house might be used in 50 or 60 years' time.
Thanks, Derek. Andrew.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it is a housing emergency. It's been a housing emergency in Cornwall for, since COVID, since before COVID, really. And it's the worst housing crisis in living memory. And the position for local families is appalling. I mean, the insecurity of those living in private rented accommodation, the extortionate rents, the very poor standards, all need to be addressed, of course. I should declare an interest. I'm chief executive of a small charity that builds affordable homes. I have to say we've been struggling in recent years because of the inflation in the construction market, and it's just, you know, it just frustrates all of us that are trying to deliver what local communities want when so much money is going into the pockets of wealthy through the tax loopholes and various COVID grants and so on that have been provided for people who are fortunate enough to be able to have property investment of the type that we're talking about, second homes and holiday homes. So that kind of a justice does need to be addressed. Now, I mean, let me make it clear that although, I mean, the figures are slightly wrong. I mean, Ian mentioned that those on the Home Choice Register at the moment, about 27,000 families in Cornwall. But I think you're probably right, Ian, that actually many families don't bother putting their name down because they think there's no chance. So probably your 46,000 is closer to the mark. And yes, there is an equivalent number of holiday and second homes in Cornwall, which kind of, you know, is rather a stark contrast, which is worth reflecting on. But I mean, how to address that injustice? It's worth saying that, I mean, it's not the politics of envy; it's the politics of social justice. It's not that. Because, I mean, people who are, you know, wealthy because they've worked hard and have talent, whatever, and they're fortunate enough to have this. That, of course, I mean, it's a free country. They're entitled to invest in property if they wish. And to be fair, you know, there are many that I know who do make a contribution to the local community and recognise the impact that they have and apologise for that. But nevertheless, they love Cornwall and want to remain and keep their properties here, but they want to pay more and they want to make a contribution to local community life. I mean, as far as finding solutions, I mean, I've already mentioned obviously the £500 million which has been spent. I mean, of that, £20,000, which Derek has referred to, £20,000 went to each of the holiday homeowners through COVID aid. I mean, I've heard excuses as to why they received it and it couldn't be done for administrative purposes to stop it happening. I mean, I raised it at the time before the grants were provided, because I've been watching this issue for some time, warned that this shouldn't happen, and asked officers to look into it. But nevertheless, the local authority was obliged because central government said they had to pay it. It's just a shockingly unacceptable. I mean, with regard to empty homes, yes, I agree. Of course, yeah. I mean, there will always be a churn in the property. In property turnover and probate issues which need to be addressed, and for other reasons properties which remain empty. And there was an empty housing unit, which I'm sorry to say at Cornwall Council, which the present Conservative administration actually scrapped. So we do need to kind of get back to addressing those issues. I do agree. I mean, the wider issue, the context really, the one which I have written books about and pamphlets about in the past, is the way in which the planning system works, which is largely fueled by greed rather than need. And what we have in Cornwall, and Cornwall is one of the best examples of how the top-down housing target-led approach completely fails. And Cornwall is one of the fastest growing places in the United Kingdom. Its housing stock has almost trebled in my lifetime, so that's over 60 years. And yet the housing problems of locals have got significantly worse. So what we learn from this is that simply building homes in itself isn't the answer. And I know that from my charity work that actually we need to use much more sophisticated tools to make sure that we can deliver what the community needs rather than what developers want to deliver, which will give them the profits that they will benefit. Yeah, so I mean, the number of measures which need to be addressed, and I'm pleased that our campaigning on this issue has resulted in even the Conservatives actually coming forward with a number of policies which have yet to be implemented, but nevertheless they're moving in the right direction to address, the council tax levels for second homes, and to address the use class, the change in use class planning, so that people have to apply for a change of use when they change a property to a holiday let, but that should apply to all, non-permanent residences. So there's a whole set of policies which I think need to be delivered. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay.
The gentleman would like to comment here.
No, different question.
Oh right, no. Yeah,
Okay.
Could I just
go quickly.
a second? And that's acknowledge that Andrew's done more than most in this area. But the problem, and I'm an ex-Londoner, you can probably hear it, there are people in London who will not be put off by increased local taxes, unless they are severe. Because we're talking people pocketing billions, let alone millions. And our little houses down here are very attractive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true.
I just want to correct something. It's unhelpful to keep giving the impression, this happened last night in St Irv, that there is no commitment to this, that there is no empty home scheme in Cornwall Council. You can go on the council website and they set up what they do. They offer a range of support for empty home property, low cost loans, evidence for VAT savings, other advice about bringing empty homes. You can also click on that and report the empty home if you know of an empty home. So it's just not true that the council haven't got resources to address this problem. I absolutely accept that we should pick it up. I'm not on the council, so if I'm re-elected, I'll certainly work with parish councils and local authority to really continue this work. I did a lot of work on it in 2015, 16, 17. But there are people committed at Cornwall Council to address this problem, and it's just unhelpful when we keep hearing from Andrew that we scrapped it. It just isn't correct.
Scrap the
It's
unit.
there on this website.
Right. A comment on this discussion before we move on. Alan?
Yeah.
Do you wait for the microphone?
One of the clear paths I'd have thought to providing more social housing is to actually build social housing. And going back to building council housing which means Cornwall County Council building council housing. Never mind going around in circles saying we're building affordable housing, blah, 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 blah. Build council housing, the rents from those will start to pay for the council housing. The other thing that annoys me, and I've only been back in Cornwall for 3 or 4 years, is listening to people complain about second home buying, where a lot of those people have sold their property to second homeowners. And then they complain, second homeowners. But the main point is, why not social housing?
Can I try that?
So then, anybody else want to comment before Andrew just comes back with a final comment before we move on? We've only got through 2 topics tonight, so far. Right, Andrew, go on quickly.
Okay, yeah, so I mentioned the fact that my charity work, I mean, that's what we do, and indeed, I mean, we finally got planning permission at the top of Newlyn for 29, I mean, the term affordable homes is, I mean, there's lots of kind of definitions of affordable home. Those would be for social rent, and we need to distinguish between social rent, which is what you call council houses, okay, which is somewhere between, it depends, there's a formula that kind of sets it, it's between 50 and 60% of market rates, okay, and affordable rent is somewhere around the 80% or no more than housing allowance, whichever is lower, but these would be for social rent. I have to say that, I mean, I've just been attacked on social media by a Conservative councillor about that project, saying, well, when is it going to be delivered? It will be delivered when we can get the money to kind of get it off the ground, which will be later this year or early part of next year. And of course, it didn't help that the Conservatives were actually campaigning against it, got it turned down. We had to appeal to get that planning permission through in order to get the 29 homes permitted, and the inspector was incredibly scathing of the way in which that particular planning application was handled. So there is an effort to do this, but we need to have a sea change in terms of the effort going. And just on your final point, it's the fault of locals for selling their homes. Well, when you put a property on a market, you just sell the property. And if you sold it to someone, you said that we're going to sell it to, it has to go to a local family, whatever. There's nothing in law to stop that local family selling it the very next day to the next highest bidder and making a packet out of it. So I'm sorry, I mean, I really do find it quite offensive to blame the local community for having created the second home problem. That is a perennial criticism which I'm afraid I don't accept.
Okay, we'll move on to this gentleman. You've got a question? Yeah. Thank you.
Hi. I'd like to ask a very mundane, down-to-earth question about Penzance. I was going to ask about warmongering in Ukraine, 12.5 billion that the Tory government spent on that. But let me keep it more local. I live in the eastern part of Penzance. And when I walk into town to Market Jew Street or the station, I walk on the Mount Bay side of the road going down to the station. And there used to be 4 benches there that people used. People would take Tupperware, have their lunch, and overlook what I think is probably our best asset, Mount Bay. Sometimes there were a few lads who might be having a drink, but as far as I could ever see, they didn't cause any trouble. Up to about 7 years ago, each time I passed by, the benches got more and more rack and ruined, I suppose you could say. The horizontal framework, wooden framework were missing, and this, that, and the other. And every time I went by with my wife, I used to complain about it, and she said, stop mulling about it and do something. So I did pursue it this year with the local councillors, and my understanding is that it's not within the remit of Penzance Council to restore those, what used to be public benches paid for by the council, that it is a Cornwall Council responsibility. And the Cornwall Council said there's no money to restore the public benches. They did seem to offer, I told you it's a bit mundane, but it's important, I think, for the community. They did say that if people were willing to pay for a memorial bench, then they may be prepared to pay for the installation. My question is this. In a town that has had millions for town improvement, why can't we restore public benches that people enjoyed, whether they were our own Penzance people or visitors? Why must we see them? Now all 4 have gone. First of all, 3 were taken away, not restored, and the 4th one recently went. So these were 4 public benches enjoyed by the community, which we say we don't have the money for, in a town in which we got millions, as I understand it, for town improvement. So my question to the panellists, to the candidates, is if you are elected, will you do something about getting those benches back?
Thank you. I think it's fair to say, probably as you might agree with me, I think these should be fairly short answers as to what you can do about these benches. So Andrew, tell us what you do about these benches, please.
Well, I won't install them myself, but I mean, it's a very good point, and it frustrates me that those matters of local pride have been left to decay while, I'm going to be very controversial here, while we're spending millions just over there on a creative cluster, which I think is taking up a valuable space which we appreciated. And there's too much of that. There's the kind of bling going into the town for things like that, when in fact actually, and then you can't find a public toilet, you know, or you can't find a decent bench to sort of sit on. I mean, there have been some very good initiatives, you know, along the seafront, in my view. I think some excellent initiatives there, and on what I often use as the cycle paths out to Long Rock. And I know people have been very critical of the artwork and the sculptures there, but actually I find them quite endearing and not very offensive. And there's lots of benches there too. So whilst I think we can kind of beat ourselves up and say that some things are going wrong, we need to address them, I think that, you know, there are some things which actually have gone rather right, and we do need to address those too. But it does worry me that there's a pressure to put resources into, as I say, big projects, and forgetting to maintain the very things which we really, really value in and around this town. So you make a very good point, and I'm glad you did. Thank you.
Well, isn't that another example of not prioritising the local community? We see the big shops, the big supermarkets pulling people out of the towns, so there's not necessarily the need for these things in their attitude. Get the people out of the towns, and then the people that are left in the towns, you get a mini supermarket from the same big chains that are pulling all the people out of the towns. So there's no need, in their eyes, for little community things like that. But those things are very important to smaller communities, and some of the funding should be there. And the problem they're saying is there's no funding, the money's going here, the money's going there. That is total rubbish. The top 10 executives of Cornwall Council earned last year £1.37 million for 10 people. I am now investigating, as I said last night, and I'll tell you the name of the company in a minute, as a detective, I've got to literally have 2 separate camps, information and evidence. I have information, I'm going to turn it into evidence. But the information is, and I've checked some on the funding downloaded from Cornwall Council, anyone can do it. It seems that one company in Bedfordshire is being paid about £800,000 per month to outsource work from Cornwall, by Cornwall Council, in particular IT. Why are we not funding that here? Building IT stations. We have a university which is ranked 5th in the world for what it supplies, Falmouth University. The people at Falmouth University, I went there, age 59, and did a degree to get to know the youngsters. And I graduated in 2020. And I've met so many 18 to 23 or 24-year-olds.
So I'm just working out,
who,
59,
yeah.
20, yeah. So I'm trying to work out your age, it's all right.
103.
103, there we go. You're doing very well for 103. There we go.
So, yeah. So I've met a lot of youngsters who have got fantastic skill sets, and they're leaving. I met an accountant, a senior media person, and a vet only last week. They've all saved up enough money, over 30,000 for a deposit on the house. They're all moving to Bristol because they cannot afford a house. And it comes back again. The little things will come if we keep the people here to provide the need for them. We have a need for them, but they don't see the need. We need to keep the workforce here, we need to keep the young generation here and provide these little things. And I think it's the little things that matter, the seats.
Okay, thanks David. Derek?
Yeah. Rush. I've got a massive list of things. So benches. So firstly, the High Street Fund and the Towns Fund, which is about £30 million. I'm pretty sure there will be money left in that to address this, so let's have a go at that. The building that Andrew quite rightly refers to, top of course we're here, that's European funding, and there is no way that could be useful, the example you're giving. But we missed a trick. So in and I don't want to blame COVID for everything, but this is genuinely the case. In 2020, early part of 2020, I went around Hustings, St Ives and Penzance with people who are quite vulnerable, but also young mums with prams, to look at whether these towns were accessible. And as Andrew says, the problem has been a fantastic bit of work. We secured quite a bit of cash to do that amazing piece of work, largely actually to credit for the late David Nebeznik, who made it a personal mission of his to see something done with the problem. But the reason we chose 2020, or the reason I was working on it then, is because it was the 25th anniversary of the Disability Discrimination Act, and I felt that it was a really good way of challenging our town centres, the businesses who also would benefit from having seats inside their shops, but also the towns and government to really look at the Disability Act and whether it works and whether it makes towns accessible. We obviously couldn't do that because of COVID turned up, and so I'll be honest, the amount of work that came after COVID took my eye off the ball. But in terms of people with disabilities, older people with dementia, for example, who actually do need the opportunity to sit down for a while with their loved ones or whoever's caring for them, but also breastfeeding mums, it's absolutely right that we provide seats. It benefits the town and the retail sector in the town if we provide that opportunity for people to go into town. And so the question is, will we do anything about it? If I'm elected, and there's no reason actually why, because my office is still working while we can't do it, I see one of them at the back, why we can't do it tomorrow, is find out whether through Jess Morris, who now handles that cash, whether High Street Funds has money left. There is money left because they're doing some work in the middle of town around the Green Market that has not yet been done. There is a promise of more seats and more benches, but they do need to be around the town and around the areas that you've described. Next year is the anniversary of the Equality Act, so let's use these tools to really raise the injustices and the discrimination that exists still for some people in our communities.
Yeah, thank you. Ian?
Well, what we know is that it's not cost effective to allow the environment to decay. If we don't respect our environment, our natural environment and our communal built environment, it leads to social problems, let alone a lack of a place to actually sit and admire the view. So I think it's quite an important issue you've raised. I'd like to raise another one alongside it. What on earth is the railway doing with a mile-long construction site in the most prominent and visually impactful location? Why isn't some pressure being put on the railway to tidy that up and actually make it part of an attractive vista instead of what it's being allowed to do? But to get back to your benches, I think we ought to, between us, find a way of re-erecting memorial benches in memorial perhaps of whatever it was in the first place, but also the end of this election.
Can I quickly pick up on the Ponton Dane? Can I just...
As long as it's quick.
1 minute, yeah. So the Ponton Dane development, the 3 sidings for the trains, the ridiculous situation is we've had more investment in the railway from Penzance to Paddington at any time in the last 10 years since it was built by Brunel in the first place. The problem is that trains are too long and they can't stay in Penzance, so they go back to Plymouth. At the end of the day, they go back to Plymouth to park up and then they come back down in the morning. The sidings are being built to allow the trains to stay in Penzance. It will be much better. There was a problem because they found some problems in the ground which cost a lot more money than they intended to spend. They've now secured, well, I've been working with Network Rail, we've now secured the money to complete that job. Ian's quite right, it's been an eyesore for a long time. But I have to say, it's fascinating to watch when you stand up on the bridge and watch the work. It's been great. My children have loved it. But it will be sorted out, and there'll also be, you'll be loving this, Ian, there'll be parking there and charging points for cars and bicycles when it's complete.
Excellent. It's been like it for 20 years.
Excellent. Right, we're going to move on to another question. And Gillian, can I just check our conversation before? Did you want the question on death, or sounds bad, or the question on Israel? Which would you prefer? Either of you. You're leaving that to me. And are you happy that I read it out? Sorry, I'm reading it out. Okay. So, is there any defence for the baby in the womb? Some parties think it's okay to abort a baby up until birth. And what defence does a person have if euthanasia is legalised here? Surely we should be a nation of life and not death, and caring for our sick and vulnerable people from birth to death. So there's quite an emotive subject there. Thank you for the question,
This
Giane.
is multifaceted. Can you run through those aspects again?
Didn't you get it?
No.
Okay, all right, didn't get it. So, is there any defence for the baby in the womb? Some parties think it's okay to abort a baby up until birth. And what defence does a person have if euthanasia is legalised here? Surely we should be a nation of life and not death, and caring for our sick and vulnerable people from birth to death. So I think there are two main parts to the question. One is regarding the process around abortion, and then one is around euthanasia. So where am I on my list? Oh, David, I think it's you. This one. Right.
On the first part of the question on abortion, you're asking a father of 8 and a grandfather of 10 children. So I'm probably going to say that I don't agree with that. The abortion up to that age. There are medical reasons, obviously, and before I was a policeman, I was actually a medical laboratory scientist. So I was involved in biochemistry. So I do know there are medical reasons for that for abortions to have to go ahead. But other than medical reasons, and that would probably cover mental health as well, I would suggest that it's not acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Ian, would you like to continue?
Well, late stage abortion is obviously wrong, and it should be avoided, unless there's, well, I can't think of any real reasons to do it. But I think early abortions is a matter for women and their health. So I don't really want to comment on that. End of life euthanasia is a topic that's come to us recently. I thought it was straightforward, but it isn't. So I'm going to disappoint you. I haven't got a solid opinion on that at the moment. So I'm sorry about that, but I think it needs a great deal of thought.
Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. With regard to the right to an abortion or a woman's right to choose, etc. I mean, the question is, should there be a defence for a woman who's been raped? Should there be a defence for those who, for a wide variety of reasons, women who wish to make a choice themselves about their own body and not have it imposed on them? So, I mean, very few abortions take place after 12 weeks, I understand. I mean, certainly, I mean, the concept, I think, in the question of a right to abort up to the point of birth, it seems bizarre and obviously quite ridiculous, really. So do I support a woman's right to choose? Absolutely. And I'm concerned that there is, a pressure to change that in a way which I think would be very significantly to the detriment of women. With regard to the question of dignity in dying, well, since the election was called, my mother died, and I was caring for her a lot during the latter stages, and so the issues are very raw with me at the moment, and all I can say is that it's right that we have methods by which we can manage issues of pain and indignity when people are facing, are in terminal decline at the end of their lives, and so the issue of euthanasia, as some people call it, or certainly enabling people to die with dignity and with maximum pain relief, at their choosing is one which I think is one which providing absolute safeguards are put in place to protect the vulnerable and to protect and to ensure that the vulnerable are not otherwise prevailed upon. That I think we do need to improve the arrangements that are made and to enable people to make that choice when they are in a serious and terminal state. So thank you.
Thank you. Derek.
Thanks, Nigel. So the criminal justice bill, which just fell before the election was called, would have been going through now, really flagged up some of these really worrying issues. There are issues that the country cares deeply about, and we need a proper debate about life and how we value life, and also how we die well. And I'm part of a group in Parliament where we actually set up a group looking at how we support people to die well. It's called Dying Well. And it's been a really helpful piece of work, listening to examples around the world of where assisted suicide takes place, and also some really, it's very difficult to do it safely in every case. There was one example which we came across quite recently in Canada, where an individual had lived with his whole life with quite disabilities. He was quadriplegic. He fell over, injured himself, went to hospital, didn't get the care he needed, and then developed some really horrible bed sores. And then the option was given to him to end his life. He didn't, but he will spend a long time recovering, if he will at all, from these bed sores. And the problem is, when you have a situation where assisted dying is made legal and the norm in the NHS, which actually people that work in the NHS, they want to save life and preserve life and prevent ill health. It's really difficult for them to be having to wrestle with. But it's a very difficult one where we've looked at lots of studies around the world where, because of the cost and because of the lack of other sorts of care, assisted dying is made one of the easier options. And actually, for some people, and I include some of the older people I know, they feel a burden to society. So I just can't help it, but within my DNA, at the moment, I don't believe assisted dying is the right way to go. But we absolutely must address palliative care and pain control. We can do it. When you talk to the hospice over at Hales and Julius, they know that they can help people to die well if there's a way of doing that. They know they can manage pain control. They know they can support them far better than we do now. Trillis got recently told off because far too many people were dying in Trillis very badly, and where they should have been taken out and cared for elsewhere. St Julia's do another amazing piece of work now where they go into the community and support someone in their home at the end of life. So if we get to a point where, and Parliament will definitely vote on this soon, there's no way that it can be ignored. We voted on it in 2016. What we voted on in 2016 was to give someone a cocktail of poisons. If a doctor could say they're likely to die in the next 6 months. My mum went to that debate. She had terminal cancer. She had been told that she would die by Christmas, that was in September. She lived right up until the end of the following year. So I, at the moment, just within my being, feel that there's so much more to do about how we help people to die well, rather than introduce assistance to dying in this country. On the issue of abortion, criminal justice bill had several amendments put to that. Two of them I put my name to. One of the amendments was to bring down the weeks from 24 to 22, because it is the case that a baby can survive at 24 weeks, and we work hard to save the baby's life at 24 weeks. And actually, if you go across Europe, the average date that a baby can be terminated is 12 weeks, and we're in 24 in this country. So 22 follows medical science more than anything else. The other one was to stop the practice where if a fetus or a child, a baby has a disability, they can legally be terminated at full term. That, again, going back to my Disability Discrimination Act, it can't be right that in this country we have a situation where someone with a disability doesn't have the same protection that a child doesn't have. And so I signed both those amendments. There was another amendment put forward by the opposition that would allow abortions to go to full term. And I think the whole panel have said that they just don't support that. But that was in the criminal justice bill. And the problem with MPs is that we feel there's a very effective lobby on both sides, and very few of us actually take time to really look at the issue and look at all lives involved, including dads, including the unborn child, and also how you support people who face that horrendous decision about what to do with a pregnancy that, for whatever reason, is something that they're considering not going through with. And I think it's a really difficult one to challenge, and it's not an easy political debate. But we need in this country to talk more about death. We don't get it, and we'll all get there. And at the moment, lots of us get there in truly horrible circumstances.
Thank you. I think that was quite a difficult question to deal with, and so thank you for all of you. It's 9 o'clock, and we said we'd aim to finish at 9 o'clock, so I want to thank you for being with us tonight. I'm sure these guys will try and get out. If anybody wants to stand at the door with a bucket to collect from the bench, we will see what we can get and see what we can do to replace the bench. But thank you for coming, and so I want to say a very special thank you to Ian, Andrew, David and Derek for their time. And don't forget, a week tomorrow, the day. Make sure you cast your vote in Penzance. But thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.